Choosing the right motherboard can be a difficult decision. There are a lot of factors that you need to think of when choosing your motherboard, and hopefully this video will help you guys choose your perfect motherboard. Now, one of the first factors I think of is what kind of CPU am I using? Knowing this is the base and will set the path for the rest of your build. For example, I'm using Intel's 7th generation of Kaby Lake processors. This features an LGA 1151 socket type, so I'll need to pick out a motherboard that's compatible with that socket type. Next, to decide on what size I want. Do I want an ITX motherboard or maybe an extended ATX motherboard? Now, depending on this, you need to make sure the PC case you're going to buy supports the size of motherboard you're buying. So in my case, I'm using NZXT's S340 Elite case, which is a mid-tower case and means I need to pick out a motherboard that is compatible with this case. After you decided your socket and size, you need to think of how much RAM do I want on my motherboard and how many GPUs am I going to put in the system. So a lot of ATX motherboards support up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, but if you maybe go with an ITX motherboard, which usually only has 2 lanes for RAM, it can support up to 32 gigabytes. As far as graphics cards go, the next thing you decide on your motherboard is whether you want SLI or Crossfire, because some motherboards can only support Crossfire but not SLI. So if you plan on having SLI in your system, you need to make sure your motherboard can support that. Up next is storage, and most motherboards have multiple SATA ports on the motherboard. So if you are interested in maybe an M.2 drive, you need to check if your motherboard will support that. Next up is USB ports. You want to check how many USB ports your case has on it, and then make sure you have the right number of USB headers on your motherboard. Also, if you're buying any type of water cooler or cooler that requires the USB 2.0, you want to make sure you have the right amount of ports to support both the case headers and the USBs coming off any accessories you might have. After that is done, take a look at the back I/O on the motherboard. When I buy a motherboard, I want to make sure it has a LAN port, designated audio jacks, and at least 4 USB 3.0 and 4 USB 2.0 ports. And that's about it when trying to choose my motherboard. I always just try to plan for the future, like if you're planning on maybe doing SLI or Crossfire in the future, make sure your motherboard can support that. So let's just take everything we just learned and put it in a real situation.
So starting off with this build, I wanted an X99 motherboard, which will feature the LGA 2011 socket type. I wanted at least 64 gigabytes of RAM, which is 64 gigabytes under what the X99 motherboards can handle, but I shouldn't need 128 gigabytes, so I should be okay. I want at least 3 lanes for SLI, at least 4 SSDs, 1 M.2, at least 2 USB 2.0 headers, and at least 1 USB 3.0 header. So if I go ahead to PC Part Picker and I go ahead and start a PC build, I can start by choosing out my CPU, which is going to be a 2011 socket. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick the first CPU that comes up, which is 6800K. And then I'm going to go to a motherboard, and PC Part Picker will automatically go through and pick out parts compatible with that CPU. So if I come down, I want an extended ATX motherboard. Come down, I want an extended ATX motherboard, X99, at least 3-way SLI. I need at least 1 M.2. I need at least 64 gigabytes of RAM, DDR4, 3-way SLI, onboard USB 3.0, and that's that. So if I go ahead and pick out the first one that's there, I can go ahead and look at the statistics of this. I can see it is the CPU socket that I wanted in the chipset. It has 128 gigabytes, which I wanted. Crossfire and 4-way SLI, so maybe I want to go with 4-way SLI in the future. 10 SATA ports, a U.2 port, which is good, and onboard USB 3.0 headers. So let's say, I'm going to go to New 8 because they usually have a lot of statistics over there. So if I come down to specifications, If I scroll down, I can see all the stuff I wanted is on here. And I can see that it actually has Wi-Fi, which is an upside. 4 USB 3.0 and 2 USB 2.0 on the rear panel. 2 USB 3.0 connectors, 2 USB 2.0 connectors, which is actually pretty good. Extended ATX. And it actually has everything I need. So if I go ahead and I'm going to look at the back I/O panel, I can see it actually has a system BIOS reset. The 4 USB 3.0s right there. It has dual LAN, which is very nice. 2 Type-C ports, 2 USB 2.0. No, that's the USB 2.0. This is USB 3.1.
Also, if this motherboard doesn't support my color scheme, I can choose from more motherboards on the list that meet all my requirements. Find ones with reliable reviews and pick on a motherboard that matches my color. The one I chose also has RGB LED headers, so if I want, I can add RGB LED strips around my case. Really, in the end, all you need to do is think ahead to what you plan on using your PC for, and how much you're willing to spend for the features you want. For you, I'm using it for content creation and for gaming, so I only need enough that I can edit videos smoothly, and the 7600K does just that for me, especially paired up with a Z270 chipset. My graphics card is enough to game at 1440p, but if in the future I want to upgrade to 4K or dual monitor setup, I can always put another card in for SLI. It also has 2 M.2 drives that I'm not actually using at the moment, which is great for whenever I decide to get those installed. For looks, I decided to go with the Strix, which has RGB LEDs on the motherboard itself, plus it has some headers so I can mount LEDs around the case as well. Altogether, I have everything I need for this motherboard and for what I plan on using it in the future. I hope this video helped you guys choose your motherboard, and at least helped me pick out exactly what I needed for my rig. And one last thing, take your time when trying to choose out your motherboard. You don't want to impulse buy or pick a motherboard with the wrong features and then end up having to send it back. And that wraps it up, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment telling me what you thought of the video. Go ahead and check out some of my other videos right here, and I'll see you guys in the next video.